Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays every month. If you're interested in asking a question or you have a question that you'd like to ask it down below and I will choose from those for next week's question and answer video. The first Sunday of every month I do a subscriber Sunday video where subscribers send in photos of things in their yard that they're proud of, and I include that in the, like I say, the first Sunday of every month. If you're interested in sending in photos for that, this is the email address. Just title the email Subscriber Sunday or Subscriber Photos or something like that, and make sure you turn your phone sideways so that they're wide angle like YouTube likes to show off. A little different than Instagram that likes your phone to be upright. I wish they were both the same, but they're not, and so it's kind of confusing to people, I think. So I've got good questions from last week, and over the course of the week I grabbed a couple others off just some good questions I saw from other videos where people had watched old videos and that kind of thing. The Wednesday video, I had some pretty good information I thought about planting tomatoes and peppers. If you haven't done that yet, it's still a bit early right here where I am in zone 7. In fact, it's 35 degrees out here right now, and so this has definitely not been a good morning to have my tomatoes in the ground. I use a soil thermometer, make sure the soil temperature is 60 degrees. I try to get to my frost-free date, which is our average last frost date, which is about now, and then I'm looking out in the forecast going forward. And we have another night in the 40s next week, so again, I'm not going to plant my tomatoes or peppers, until we get past that. A couple more nights in the 40s that I see on the forecast. So that's where I am with that. And what else? I get a lot of this Japanese maple. It might be directly behind me. That's in the container right here. I got a lot of questions from Wednesday on that. That is a Japanese maple that I've trained in that pot for years, and then I put it in this decorative pot in a video at the old house maybe 18 months ago or so, and now it's made its way up here, and that's where it's going to reside for right now. I get a lot of questions about it. It is beautiful, and I have bent it back and forth over time and trained it to have that contorted shape. So that's what that is. Another question I get, yeah, you can see it. Another question I get, this Golden Falls Redbud right here is not rooted out into that pot, and that's the reason I'm not planting it. The additional question I got was, why is it on those bricks? And so I want to let you guys know something that I've learned in the nursery business over a long period of time is that I talked about in a video a couple weeks ago, there's always this layer down at the bottom on a potted plant that's super, super wet, okay? The reason that you'll see nurseries growing on gravel or that black fabric with some gravel under it is they want to create some drainage where the bottom holes on that pot, the water is allowed to escape freely, okay? If I take that pot and I set it directly on that mulch, it will seal up those holes that are on the bottom of that pot, okay? And then on top of that, that soil that's at the very bottom of that pot is super, super wet anyway, and it creates a space where you can end up with some root rot problems. And so it's a hard lesson in the nursery business that some people do where they just think they can roll out fabric, or you have to have a barrier, a plastic barrier between the soil on the ground and your pots above the ground, or at least some sort of thick gravel barrier. And so that's the reason you'll see me elevate something off a mulch space like that, is because you'll get disease problems. It's weird, I can put the tree directly in the ground and not get that same disease problem. The only reason it's coming up is because the bottom, 20% of the soil in that pot is super, super wet. And it just creates an environment, if it gets trapped in that pot, that can cause disease problems. But that's the reason it's elevated. One other thing before I get to the bulk of these questions is, if you would go over to my website, it's horttube.com, and at the very bottom there's a thing, just ask for your name and email address. I won't spam you in any way, but once a month, I'm looking back here at Holly, once a month I'm going to have a newsletter that just kind of updates what I did last month, what I may have coming up forward, maybe some additional information that's not in the videos. There'll be some sort of written blog post about, maybe include some information that you're not seeing in the videos, or something I forgot and left out or whatever. So if you, like I say, go over to that, and like I say, I won't spam you, it'll be a once a month thing. Okay, off to some questions from last week's video. Somebody asked me about growing a dogwood in the full sun in zone 7, and I'm in zone 7. I don't want to say no, it's not a good idea, because I do occasionally see a dogwood in the full sun just in the middle of a field doing pretty well. But if you'll look, the vast majority of dogwoods, or native dogwoods, grow right on the wood line. So as you're going down the highway, you'll see them right on the edge of the woods. There are some a little deeper in the woods, but they tend to be thin and not that happy. The happiest ones are right on the edge. So if you can find a spot with a 50-50 mix of sun and shade, that's really where a dogwood wants to be. Same with redbuds, really. Okay, somebody asked me about drip irrigation settings. They're running their drip. They feel like they got it pretty dialed in, but their hydrangeas are still wilting in the summertime. And so a couple things. One, I want to make sure you guys don't ever water to the driest plant in your yard. This is a hard thing to teach. I've been trying to teach it for 30 years through various businesses. When I had my nursery, if I had somebody in charge of the irrigation, they'd come in, see one block was dry, and then they water the whole nursery. And I couldn't get that. It's really hard to get that to stop. You know, I have my space of plants at the Raleigh Farmers Market. There's 2 or 3 dry plants. Got to water the whole space. And that's just, you just want to water those 2 or 3 plants. If you have a drip irrigation system and something on the system is still wilting, but everything else seems happy, add some additional emitters or additional piece of line around it, or start watering that thing by hand sometimes, because if you water to the driest plant, you will overwater everything else. So you're going to damage 50% of your landscape to save 2 plants. And so sometimes what I would do in those situations at the nursery was I'd tell guys to just go prune those plants. I'm not telling you to prune your hydrangeas, but we would prune some of our plants that were being super greedy for water, and that would slow the water usage down, or we just go ahead and pot them into a larger pot. But in the case of stuff that's in the ground, if one thing is wilting, don't turn your irrigation system on for that. Water to the middle rather than watering to the driest plant, and add some additional water to those hydrangeas. Okay, let me see. Somebody asked me when they took down a tree, when will the suckers stop? You know, the little pieces from the root shoots keep coming up. A long time, but people really, I think, overthink this a lot. If you'll grab, it's very therapeutic to go grab a shovel and just very quickly take the shovel and go about 1 inch underneath those suckers and cut them off, and just keep walking and leave them in place. And you can go through 100 root suckers in a matter of a minute or 2, just, you know, doing this, taking out a little bit of frustration, and be done with it. And then a couple months later, come back and do the same thing. And if you'll keep cutting them off below the surface and they can't get any energy from the sun, they'll fade away, but it can take a couple years. But if you give them any time to come up and overthink it without cutting them off, they're gaining energy from the sun, which is allowing them to do it again and again and again. So get out there and take some frustration out on them, cut them off about 1 inch below the soil, and just keep walking, leave them in place, let them mulch right where they are. Somebody asked me how long before you change out the potting soil in a potted plant, and I talked about that in Wednesday's video, that potting soils with peat moss or coconut coir or pine bark. I use a lot of pine bark in my potting mixes, especially for things like that Japanese maple. You know, they'll last a year, maybe 2 if you were fertilizing, but they do run out of, I said on Wednesday, oomph. They don't have, the mineral content does run out. You know, some of the things that the plants need. The difference between the soil in that container media is that the soil is rock dust, and the rocks have mineral content in them. And through microbial activity in the soil, those nutrients are continually delivered to, you know, available to your plants. And whereas in that container media, it's just not there. It's only a limited amount. That's why, you know, raised bed gardening or gardening like I do in my vegetable gardening where I'm in pure compost, you have to redo the re-add compost, because the compost does kind of run out of, it's amazing material. It's the best stuff on earth to grow in, but it does run out very quickly of just basic nutrients because it's just not rock. Okay, let's see. I talked about the trees being on the bricks. Somebody asked me what I'll do when the landscaping here is done. Obviously, I think this back part back here, you know, will be finished this year, and other house projects. I got to go the rest of the way around the house with the siding and that kind of thing. And then I'll start on the front yard at some point this year. After that, I actually had a plan next year to go on the road and do some traveling and some talks and film some gardens all over the country. And that's actually my plan, and I hope it continues to be my plan. I just have no idea at this point. I had already decided to start in Arizona. My son and I were going to start in Arizona in January, and we were going to do gardens of Arizona because I wanted to show how different one state can be. My state is this way. North Carolina is, we've got zone 6 and probably a few pockets of even zone 5B up in our highest mountains like Mount Mitchell. And I wanted to show mountain gardens and then gardens in the Piedmont where I'm at, which is kind of a clay area that's right in the middle of the state of North Carolina, and then go down to the sand hills and just show, you know, gardening in North Carolina is vastly different from one side to the other. And we were going to start in Arizona and show that. Arizona may be one of the best, you know, places to show that, you know, from the mountain areas down to, you know, some of the hottest places in the country. That's still my plan. I have no idea, but I do have a grand plan of doing all 48 states over a couple years and showing the amazing public gardens and that kind of thing on this channel. That's Jim's next plan, and who knows. Let's see. Somebody asked me what type of fence is going in here. I get the fence question all the time because the chain link fence obviously has got to go. At first, I was really thinking about a 6-foot tall horizontal fence that was going to be, the problem is I think it's going to be a little bit prison-like. And so I think I'm going to leave gaps in the fence. I think I'm still going to do a really nice, I'm going to do black aluminum upright poles and then do horizontal fencing and use like 2x6s, but and then finish them. So it'll be super nice, but I actually think I'm going to leave gaps in it now, and so that it doesn't seem prison-like. There's no reason really to block the woods back here. My neighbor here is perfectly nice, and this is actually an open space beside me that the city owns. So really no reason to turn it into a prison. Okay, and then somebody asked me, the last question here for this week, somebody asked me, they got some vines that grow really, really quickly with really brightly colored berries, wondered if it was beautyberry they were having to cut out. That's actually porcelain berry, and I've got some along the fence over here, and even in 35-degree weather, it's waking up and it's got to be cut back. Porcelain berry is a tough, tough weed to control, and you've got to just constantly work on it. Once it's seeding itself, you definitely just don't ever want it to let it get to the spot in the fall where it seeds itself, and so you got to pull it out all year long. Once you recognize it, it's a tough weed, and it does vine through your plants, and so there's a lot of times where you don't know, and then it can kind of become a little shrubby once it reaches the sunlight, but very viney as it goes up through your plants. Tough weed, but it's called porcelain berry. Okay, thank you very much for following along with all these, you know, the Wednesday update videos and these Sunday question and answer videos. If you have any gardening questions, ask them down below and I will pick from them next week. Thanks for watching.